Welcome to another edition of GTN Coach's Corner, where we try to answer all your triathlon-related questions. In today's show, we look at fitting training in during Ramadan fasting and how to take up the cycling side of triathlon, how to deal with sessions that you've missed, how the pros transport their nutrition, and finally, can I actually manage the swim leg of a triathlon? Let's get to all of those. Remember, if you have your own questions, leave them in the comment section down below this video. Use the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, and we could be answering your questions next week. Right, straight to it. The first question is from DodyMad22, and he asks, GTN Coaches Corner, with Ramadan coming up, a month of fasting from 5:30 a.m. until 8 p.m. approximately, I was wondering what would be the best time to do my 2 training sessions per day. The challenge is that it coincides with my build phase, and so the workouts will be intense. Any suggestions? Thanks. Okay, well, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this, and I don't really know how these guys do it because, a whole month of fasting all day, I'm not sure I'd last a day, and I certainly wouldn't be thinking about my training. And that is probably my first advice. I'm going to base my advice simply on, as a coach presented with these kind of challenges, how would I best advise you to do it? And I'm going to start my advice with lower your expectations. You cannot expect to train at the same level and do the same kind of sessions that you're doing in normal eating, where you're fueling before and after your sessions when you are fasting throughout the day. You need to lower your expectations a little bit. Don't put too much strain on yourself, but that's not to say you can't train at all. Ideally, you would exercise before your meals so that immediately after your meals you can refuel and recover and rehydrate. But obviously, if the sun rises at 5:30 a.m., that's going to make for a really early start to exercise before you can eat in the morning. Of course, the first session is not too much of an issue. If you've had a big suhoor before dawn, you're going to be well fueled and you get through that session. I would say though, with a full stomach, you're going to have to lower the intensity, maybe not doing a high intensity session immediately, and so save that for later on in the day. Do a lower intensity session that having some food in your stomach is not going to affect it too much. Also, doing a lower intensity session as the first thing in the day decreases your chance of dehydrating and then having to get through the entire day dehydrated. So it's probably best to do a lower intensity session immediately in the morning, and then you can do a higher intensity session or a second session before your evening iftar. That, of course, means you're doing it on a slightly depleted state, so it's going to be that much harder to push that higher intensity. And as I said, lower your expectations a little bit. But it does have the advantage of immediately after that high intensity session, you can refuel and rehydrate, which is important to get you ready for the following day. Of course, you can train late into the evening, but again, that becomes really practically difficult to fit in. As I've already said, it is important during this phase to focus on hydration and electrolytes. This is probably the hardest part of fasting all day and not taking in any fluid or fuel for the whole day. You're going to get dehydrated, and training is going to push you even further into dehydration. So you need to be very careful of this. You don't do high intensity sessions that are going to seriously dehydrate you if you cannot rehydrate pretty soon afterwards, because you can put your health at risk. So if you do have any signs of dehydration, dizziness, weakness, feeling faint or dark urine, then put your health first and take in some fluids to make sure you're not at health risk. Good luck with that challenge. It is definitely a big challenge. I would say your first goal is to just make sure you don't lose any fitness during that month. And then if you're lucky, if you can really pull it off, maybe you can build a little bit of fitness. I do realize that for DodyMad22, it is his build phase for his big race, which is not ideal. But yeah, do your best. I'm sure you can get through it and through the other side. Okay, on to our next question. Beamermaid asks, GTN Coach's Corner, as a long distance runner and ex-swimmer in the slow process of transitioning to triathlon and Ironman 70.3, I'm curious to know how challenging it is to start cycling on a proper triathlon bike, and what your tips and tricks are to actually get started and become comfortable with it. I feel generally overwhelmed with all the different types of bikes, shoes, bike components out there. Okay, well, firstly, any bike will do. just get out there and ride. Don't feel too pressured that you have to have a specific triathlon bike to do a triathlon. You can literally do it on any bike, especially your first few triathlons. So don't feel pressured. I would start with a road bike. Now, a road bike is the one that you see them using in the Tour de France, the ones with the drop handlebars. You don't need to get one of the ones that they use in the Tour de France. Those are like 8,000 to 10,000 pounds. You can get a much cheaper version, but start with those drop handlebars. And start with flat pedals if you are nervous riding on the bike. You don't have to jump straight into clipless pedals or clipped pedals. It's the same thing, don't ask. Later you can add on aero bars onto those drop handlebars, so they just clip on the front, and you can start practicing getting into a more aerodynamic position as you get more comfortable. And much later on, you can start looking at more fancy bikes. Ask someone in a bike shop or an expert or someone who knows about triathlon to walk you through the whole bike from top to bottom when you first get it. That means how the gears work, how the pedals work, how the brakes work, everything like that. Not just pull this and you brake, but actually how they work and how they're routed and everything. The better you know your bike, the more comfortable you'll be with it. And bikes they're not that complicated machines. And also learn how to change a tire, because that is another thing that people really stress about. So if you learn how to do it, it's not very difficult, and you'll be that much more confident just heading out there onto the road. And soon, you'll be browsing websites for that fancy carbon time trial bike, but don't worry about that right now. Just get out there and ride. Okay, next question. Cheyenne Tesser 5862 asks, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, what do you do when you miss a session in your training plan? Do you just skip on to the next ones, or do you move up the entire schedule in order to do all the sessions? Right, this is a common question. Life happens, sessions get missed. It's a problem for everyone. And as the asker says, you have two choices. You can either try and make up that session and squeeze it in somewhere else, or you can miss that session out entirely and just forget about it. Generally, the answer is a session missed is a session lost. It is gone. Don't try and make it up. Don't try and squeeze it in. The reason for this is that your program is worked out to balance your stress with your recovery. And if you then start shortening the recovery by squeezing in other sessions, you affect the following session, which affects the following session, etc., etc. And you basically set yourself up on this vicious cycle where eventually you're going to get burned out or worse, injured. So it is generally best to just miss it. Of course, if you do have a break coming up in your program and you can fit it in where it doesn't affect your recovery too much, then sure, you can make it up. But generally, a session missed is a session lost. It may seem counterintuitive, but often you're better off and you'll be better prepared for your upcoming race by skipping that session and never making it up than by squeezing it in the wrong place and making up that session, doing all the sessions, but not doing the right amount of recovery. So ironically, you'll be better off missing that session as far as your preparation goes. I hope that answers your question. Our next question is from Señorito Querido. Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Hi friends, I really want to know how the pros pack their liquid nutrition for a whole Ironman. I hear they concentrate it in one bottle, but how do they distribute it properly during the race on the go? How do they dilute it? How much of it do they concentrate? Can you guide us on a step-by-step process of packing and consuming liquid nutrition like a pro for the full distance? This is interesting, and I'm going to walk you through a common solution, what I used to use when I was racing as a pro. But before I do, I'd just like to point out that pros have different challenges to age groupers, and doing it like a pro is not necessarily the best answer for you. The pros have different goals and different factors to factor into their nutrition that you necessarily don't. So take it with a pinch of salt, but let me walk you through what I used to do. What I used to do is decant as many bottles as many gels as I needed, or as I could fit, into a 750 ml bottle. So that was sometimes 12 to 14 gels. I'd top that up with a little bit of liquid just to make sure it was as runny as possible so that I could drink it out of that bottle. And then I would mark on the bottle with the marker pen and actually put times or first hour, second hour, third hour, fourth hour, so that I knew roughly how I was going through it, so that I could pick up the bottle halfway through, look at it and go, right, I'm halfway through the bottle and I'm halfway through the race, I'm roughly on schedule. And that way I know how many calories I'm getting and I can keep a rough, it's fairly rough, but it's also specific enough that you're getting the right amount of calories at the right time. I then have another bottle or two on a hot day on the bike of liquid, either water or electrolyte drink, which I can replace at aid stations and keep the hydration going and really adjust my hydration depending on how thirsty I was getting and how hot it was. So the hydration is separate from the nutrition. And then separate from that again, I'd have my electrolytes or additional electrolytes above that electrolyte drink. So I'd have either salt tablets or some other form of salt where I can take that in separately again. So then if I'm feeling like I need more salt because it's particularly sweaty that day, I would take in extra salt. And that way, if you do need more calories, you can take more calories without taking in more fluid. Separately, if you need more fluid because it's a particularly hot day, but you don't want to take in a whole bunch more calories, you can just drink an extra bottle of water or electrolyte drink. Now, as I said at the beginning, you can replicate this and you can do a very similar thing for yourself. But be aware that pros are in a very different situation than you are. A pro's race is almost certainly, for a male Ironman pro, going to be between 8 hours and 8.5 hours. And that's it. It's a very narrow window. Anything more than 8.5 hours, essentially, their race has not gone to plan and they can just slow down, use aid stations. They're out of the prize money and they're probably just going to cruise it in as a training day. So they have a very specific set of time that they're going to be out there for. You, on the other hand, your race doesn't need to be over because you're half an hour behind schedule. You still need to be getting it in. You still need to be concentrating on the second half of the race, etc. Whereas a pro, half an hour behind schedule halfway through the bike, his day's over anyway. He doesn't need to factor that in. So that's one thing. The other thing is also the pros have much higher speeds and much less time to absorb and pick up all that nutrition that they need en route. So they have a special needs bag and then they carry everything else with them. Whereas you can actually walk aid stations, slow down a little bit and make sure your nutrition is on point the whole time and get to the second half of the event far better prepared. Whereas pros are not only on the limit pace-wise, they're also on the limit nutrition-wise the whole day from the very beginning, and you don't need to be there. You need to build in a little bit more contingency, a little bit more of a plan for the whole day. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Right, next question then is from Dissetore93, and they ask, "Hi, GTN Coaches Corner. I would like an honest opinion to the following. I'm setting the goal, and I've been pondering over it for a while, of doing my first triathlon this summer, probably in September. The problem might be, surprise, my swimming. After taking adult swim lessons last year, I managed to overcome my fear of water and learnt the basics of front crawl. Still, right now, I have to stop after a length or two to take a breath, and swimming continuously for 750 meters seems an impossible task. In your experience as coaches, do you think I might have set an over-ambitious goal? I feel that I can do it, but I obviously don't have the experience to say it with any certainty." Well, I'll say straight away, you can do it. Definitely. I have no doubt you've already done the hardest part. The hardest part is starting. The hardest part is overcoming that initial fear of the water and getting in the water and learning the basics. And you've already done that. So you can definitely do it. It is not as intimidating as it sounds. I know in the pool it's hard to swim maybe 2 or 3 or 4 lengths without stopping, but you'll find that on race day it's far easier than you actually thought it was, and you will get through it, especially if you work from now till then. I will say, having done those adult swim lessons is a very good idea. It's going to work on your stroke. Don't think that now that you can keep your head above the water and you can swim 1 or 2 lengths, you now need to stop the lessons and stop thinking about your technique. It's all about fitness, because that is a mistake that a lot of new swimmers make. It is a technique sport and you need to learn that technique as best as possible. The more efficient you get and the more effective your technique is, the less effort it's going to take and the better you will swim. And essentially, you want to get fit for swimming whilst learning technique, rather than learning your technique and then trying to get as fit as possible, because you won't actually get any faster. So keep taking those lessons. You can decrease them to less often, and in between you can just work on it yourself, but you should keep doing those lessons and work on that swim stroke, and I guarantee you by September, you'll be comfortable swimming 750 meters in that event, and you get through that swim, and then it's bike and run, and you can enjoy your day, and you'll be very proud of yourself when you did. So definitely go for it. You haven't bitten off more than you can chew. Good luck with that, and good luck with all of your challenges that you have in training. Remember, if you need help with any of those challenges, send us a question, hashtag GTN Coaches Corner, below this video or below any of our videos, and we could be answering your question next week in the GTN Coaches Corner. Thanks for watching.